What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York, calling from the quarantine zone again, and this time we got Wolf Hoffmann of the Almighty Accept. Thank you so much for your time today, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, nice to be with you. How are things going in New York? That's where you are. I guess that's where you are, right?
Yep, in the middle of Manhattan. It's fine, all things considered. Everything. You're in Germany right now?
I'm not. I'm actually in Florida, just down the coast from you. Just down the road, practically.
Same thing. But
no. Yeah, it's you know what it's like. It's crazy times, man. I don't know what to say.
Crazy times.
It's a new normal. I hope it's not going to be a new normal. I hope it's going to go away at some point. But
I've been saying that when this is over, we're going to enter the best era of the arts in history. Like, that's what I'm looking forward to. We're going to enter like a new age renaissance. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, maybe. I think so. I mean, people are just sitting and waiting for the doors to open, and it's going to be a mad rush to concerts and art shows and God knows what else, because people have just been sitting at home and hopefully been creative. And, I think there's going to be a lot of unreleased energy coming out.
Yeah, definitely. And, we have something to look forward to when, tours do return, because the new Accept album, To Mean to Die, is absolutely awesome. Do you consider this just a continuation of the Rise of Chaos, or being that it's been, 4 years at this point, that this is almost kind of like a new beginning for Accept in a way?
Has it really been 4 years? I haven't even counted, but I thought we'd made 5 albums in 10 years, and I thought that was pretty good going. To me, it's a continuation. I mean, these last 5 albums, in my mind, appear like one big block where, we started with Mark and it's been going steady ever since. And we made album, and each one of them seems to go forward and upward, and things are going quite really well for Accept. It's been a very productive and steady period in our career, I'd say. I mean, I'm now the only surviving original member, and I've been doing this for over 40 years, but we never had such a continuous creative phase that seemed pretty steady, actually.
Definitely. It feels like that, because I feel like, with, Blind Rage to the Rise of Chaos to this new album, To Mean to Die, it just seems like you've been on like a never-ending like creative spree and a really great momentum working for you.
Yeah, I think so too. And it all started in when it was 2009, when we met Mark Tonillo and we released Blood of the Nations, our first album after many, many years of a hiatus. And ever since, it's been amazing. Really, countless world tours and live albums and this and that, and orchestra tour. So we've been really busy and released a lot of stuff, and fans really seem to appreciate it. So it's great.
When you go into the creative process to make a new Accept album, is there like a preconceived idea in advance that you start off with, or is there kind of like a lot of improvising or a lot of trial and error in the songwriting process?
Yeah, it's all about trial and error. There's never a preconceived idea for an album. Basically, I just start writing ideas and don't even think about, could they be used for anything, or are they even worthwhile for it? I try not to analyze anything. I just try to let it flow initially for weeks and months at a time, and just record anything that comes to mind. And sometimes there's seemingly almost silly little ideas that are never going to make it into an Accept song, but I record them anyhow, because once they're there, at least, you can always not use them, but it'd be a shame to not even let them out, because they just sort of develop. And to this day, I don't even know how ideas actually, where they're coming from. Sometimes you just sit there with a guitar and all of a sudden there's a riff, or there's a nice little melody, or an chord change or something. And you never quite, to this day, I find this songwriting process quite magic and mysterious, because it just sort of happens by itself and you never really know why and how. But anyhow, I record a bunch of stuff initially and then eventually go back over all these ideas and figure out which one of those would be, worth looking at again and maybe turning into a complete Accept song.
Do you feel like with the new album that the first single that you released, The Undertaker, that almost serves as like maybe a clear representation of what the whole entirety of To Mean to Die is going to sound like? Or is that just the tip of the metal iceberg?
That is just a snippet of the whole thing. And, I've been asked this before. People, for for some reason there's the assumption that a single represents an whole album. It cannot, because unless the whole album is exactly like that song, which never really is, then it's just, it's just one of 11 songs, and they're all quite different on this album, I think. There's some straight in-your-face riffing, hardcore, high-speed songs, and there's some sort of more melodic stuff. There's a ballad, there's an instrumental. I mean, there's so many different song stuff. It all sounds like Accept, but it's got a lot of variety in the end. So there's not one song that represents the whole album. Definitely not. And sure, The Undertaker is just one of the songs we picked because it was fairly complete early on, and we felt that it was well-rounded, and why not let the fans have a snippet of the album,
Yeah, well, I've always thought that, like, with the Accept albums, especially when you reunited with Blood of the Nations, that, like, if you played me, like, a small snippet of a song, I'd be like, okay, that's off of Blood of the Nations, or that's off of, Blind Rage, or The Rise of Chaos, etc. So I think, like, you always try to demonstrate evolution into your sound, right? There's not, like, a formula that you try to stick with, right?
No, of course not. I mean, that formula in itself sounds quite negative. But what we do have is a deep appreciation and respect for the history and the legacy of Accept. So, with other words, we're trying to write songs that we could have written 30 years ago, just never did. So, at the same time, it might be a fresh idea, a brand new song, but it's sort of like a song that fits very well into the stuff we've done in the past. It's just a new idea, but completely familiar in a way. That's what we're trying to do.
In order to get, like, that creative inspiration behind your guitar work, do you sometimes prefer to be in the company of your other bandmates to come up with riff ideas or solo ideas?
No.
Or you need to be in isolation, right?
Yeah, I like to be alone a lot of times. I don't know why. I mean, I used to write with Peter, the bass player, a lot in the past, but even then, a lot of times it starts being alone. I mean, I have spontaneous ideas when we sometimes just jamming and goofing around. I come up with a good riff, but when it comes to songwriting and sort of further development of ideas, that maybe then it's usually best when I spend my time alone for some reason. I don't know why. And I tell you what, the hardest part is a lot of times when you have a cool riff or you have a cool part, and then it kind of stops there. Then, to turn that into a finished song and to write something to an existing part, that's really hard sometimes. And you got to try this, you got to try that, you got to try sometimes up to, 10 different versions until you have something that feels right.
Well, it's rock and roll, and I think we're artists, so isolation is always such a great source of creativity, and I think that, like, a lot of the greatest songs of all time were written by accident. I think the music world is full of happy accidents, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and sometimes that happens too, that a song almost practically writes itself in one swoop, you do it in 20 minutes and it's done. That happens. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen,
Yeah. And I'm sure it's always great when you have the best idea and it comes so quick. Because I feel like your songs capture a moment, which is what I've always admired about Accept. I feel like your songs really capture a moment or an emotion. So do you find it maybe like the longer you're working on something, the harder it is to kind of like maintain that creative spark in a way?
It is. Yeah, but it's still, I mean, like, I'll give you an example. One of the songs on this album, Zombie Apocalypse, I probably have written, like, I don't know, a dozen songs or ideas for that. We liked the title, and we wanted to write that song because Mark really liked the words, and I liked the way that it sounded, and I liked the idea. But, man, I've written so many different attempts, and it never quite felt right until one day it felt right, and now I think it's good. So sometimes it just takes that extra step, and you can't always just write it off just because it didn't go smooth the first time around,
Yeah, definitely. I've always said that there's there's rock and roll heaven, there's rock and roll hell, but there's also rock and roll purgatory, which I call the realm of forgotten riffs.
Yeah, I have a huge collection of, I could kill you with riffs. I've got thousands of them just sitting on a hard drive somewhere. Never saw the light of day, and a lot of them are quite good, actually. It just never had the the other parts for the song, because a riff is just a starting block in a way. But where does it go from there? And where does this song lead? And what's the chorus line? And what's this? What's that? What's the hook line? What's the other parts? It's so much more than the riff.
Yeah. You ever worried that the song or the original way you wrote something is going to be a B-side one day to just be the biggest hit Accept's ever had?
You never know. You never know.
Yeah. It's always the scariest part about the artistic process, right?
That's right.
Do you have a theoretical background behind your guitar playing at all? Like, do you think of what key and scale you're working off of, or are you more on the self-taught side?
Both. I'm pretty self-taught, but I'm quite familiar with what I'm playing. A lot of times I do not think about it, though. That's the weird thing. I mean, I kind of know what key I'm in, and I kind of know which notes fit with the chords and all that, but it kind of, I let the try to, depending on what it is. I mean, sometimes there's solos where I really think about the melodies and the parts in my head before I even play them. And then I would say that's the case when it's more of a structured and written out solo. Yeah. But then there's other times when I'm just sort of trying to noodle along and come up with cool little licks and phrases, and it's mostly I'm just enjoying playing. Then I try not to think which note I'm playing so much. I just let her rip and see whatever notes work best without fully realizing why they work. So I'm not fully taught, but I kind of have a good understanding of what's going on the guitar neck.
Yeah, I feel like you have the best of both worlds where, like, you know what you're doing, but you're not dictated too much by the rules. I feel like if you have too much classical training, it could almost enslave you, and you kind of have more of, like, a narrow mind. But then, like, if you don't know anything, you kind of, like, are directionless in a way. So I think you have the best of both worlds with Accept.
Yeah, well, I try to listen. I try to listen first and see if it sounds good, then it is good. I don't think, I don't know. People always ask me what kind of scales, Phrygian and Lydian and blah, blah, and all this kind of, and I have no idea about any of that. And I don't care, honestly. To me, if it sounds good, it is good. So if it seems to fit well with, the piece or the song or the chords, then I'll go with that. And yeah, I have a certain taste for classical inspired things also a lot of times. So, there's that. But other than that, I try to not to analyze what I do too much, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, do you maybe like approach guitar differently when you play with Accept versus like the two solo albums such as Classical and Headbangers Symphony? Like, is it almost kind of like a different mind frame in a way?
No, I wouldn't go so far. It's very similar in a way. It's only when you're working on the classical instrumental stuff, it's a lot more challenging because you don't have all the tools of the vocals. It's really hard work to come up with an instrumental song that's interesting for 3-4 minutes. You'd be surprised how much more difficult that is than writing a song where you've got the lyrics, you've got the vocalist with different inflection, and you basically repeat the verses, and automatically they're different because it's different words. Well, when you're just using guitar and that's your only tool, you really got to come up with a lot more. You can't just repeat stuff over and over again. It doesn't work that way. You got to really think of something, whether it's sounds or melodic parts, or I don't know. It's quite a challenge to write interesting instrumental stuff.
Absolutely. And I was having a discussion with a couple of guitarists about this because, like, I've always said that the guitar is really much like a vocalist in a way, in conveying melody and conveying like an emotion with the instrument. I've always thought that, guitar sounds are a language in itself. So, like, I don't care if you can, go all out shredding for 17 and a half minutes straight. Like, I think in the end, you got to make the guitar solo. There is such a thing as a great guitar solo with very few notes and a bad guitar solo with 1,000 notes.
I've always been an admirer of people who can really express something with like 5 notes versus a guy who can just play a gazillion notes sweeping up and down the neck. To me, that's oftentimes quite boring. Even though I admire the technical skills and the virtuosity when somebody can do that, but at the same time, I think it can get boring. It turns into noodling quite easily.
Yeah.
So like David Gilmour playing like, I don't know, some really slow solo, that touches me way more than, say, an Yngwie Malmsteen kind of stuff. Even though, and it's both super. It's both not easy, of course. I wouldn't, just because something is technically challenging doesn't really mean it's superior to anything that's slower.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember somebody. There was a cartoon I was watching one time that was mimicking bad rock and roll bands, and the ideology is if we play loud, then people will think we're good, and it's and that's not the case.
No, it's not the case, but funny.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to playing guitar live, is it almost like a different energy or a different strategy playing live versus when you're in the studio or when you're in your practice space? Do you almost feel like it's like playing live guitar is almost kind of like a different strategy altogether?
Yeah, of course it is, because you play for the moment, and ideally, once that note is hit, you forget about it and you move on. It's just for here and now. Where when you're in the studio, you think about, this is going to be here for eternity. So you want to make, I work on nuances like crazy sometimes. Especially when I have one of those guitar solos that are worked out and I know exactly what I want to play, then I play it, 100 times until I'm 100. I play with those little nuances, like a little bend or a little vibrato here, or some of those little nuances that nobody else hears, but I hear them. And in the end, I think it makes a difference. And even if it just makes it 1% better, I still would do 100 takes, because why not? I love doing that kind of stuff. You sort of zone into it. It's almost like meditation,
Yeah, definitely.
I love doing that.
And I feel like, when I watch you, you played at Irving Plaza, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago, and just the crowd interaction and the emotion that was channeled on stage. I felt like we were feeding off of you guys, but it also looked like you fed off the crowd just as much.
Well, yeah, that's what a live show is all about. I mean, that is my response to when people ask me, why don't you do any sort of Corona live stream show? Just the thought is dreadful to me, because playing to a bunch of cameras, it could never be the same as playing to a bunch of excited metal fans, whether it's a few hundred or a few thousand or tenth of thousands. It's just an energy that people exchange on stage with the audience. That's what a live show is all about, and that's where the fun is. Because, even if it's just a simple riff you've played a gazillion times, it makes all the difference when people get into it and they start dancing and singing along and jumping up and down and expressing themselves. And wow, there's a lot of energy that gets exchanged that way. And so that's the fun of live playing. And it's awesome.
Yeah,
it's just a completely different mindset from playing in the studio, obviously.
Yeah, I feel like you finally get to exert all that, because a lot of people say that the studio, it's kind of static at times. It's kind of dictating, and there's not much room for freedom on there. And the live shows is where you could just let out all the energy that you channeled into the recording, but much more liberally.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. It's about having fun and enjoying each other and rocking hard. And if you hit a bum note, you're not sweating it so much. It's just, come on, man. It's a live show. It's not supposed to be perfect. I would never, to me, it's all about moving around and having fun and, seeing the audience and having a good time. And it's not supposed to be a perfect representation of a record. I always try to get as close as I can, but I'm not sweating it if it's not exactly the same. Come on. It's supposed to be a live show with fun. And a show at the end of the day,
Yeah, it's always fun when, somebody fucks up a note, because it goes to show that we're real, that, that what we're seeing is real.
Yeah.
It's not like you're...
And I actually, funny enough, I even like those moments when things go terribly wrong and and then the power goes off or something, I don't know, guitar strings break. And those are sometimes the moments that the audience loves, that kind of shit. I know it. You try to not have that happen, but when it happens, after all these years, you got to take it with humor and make the best of it. I mean, we've even had it happen where my guitars didn't work, and I took the other guys, the Uwe's guitars, and he was just without a guitar, and we just continued on, and he was just dancing up around on stage and firing up the audience. I mean, just make the best of whatever happens on stage, and the audience appreciates that. Yeah, it's not about perfection.
Yeah. But do you feel like that crowd interaction and stage presence is also something that you have to practice, or is that just something that you kind of get better at as you play more and more and more?
Yeah, you get more confident and you get better at it over time. But I tell you, in the beginning, there was a time in the 80s, early 80s, we had a pretty serious stage choreography for a while where we knew exactly where anybody was during which chorus and what we would do. We had certain sort of movements on stage that we would do all together with all three guitar players. And some of that is even in our shows today. It's just a snippet of what we had back then. But yeah, there was a time when we actually did rehearse that in the 80s.
Did you have like dolls set up and you had to pretend to like point your fingers at them as you were playing and like?
Oh, no, I didn't go that. No, that would have been posing. That would have been too much. We didn't go that far.
That would be.
But we actually
funny.
did a bunch of, and it was quite effective too. I got to say. I mean, it worked quite well.
Yeah, definitely. You know, you don't want to be too static on stage, but you also, still want to play the songs right and still, be technically impressive. You know, we take it with humor when it comes, but, don't make it abysmal.
Exactly. And then the other thing is a lot of times it's quite shocking, especially in the beginning, when you see video footage of yourself and you think you look really cool when you do, I don't know, some shake your head or, I don't know, you do something with the guitar and you strike a pose and you think you look really cool, but then you see it on video and you think like, oh boy, that looked like shit. So there's a learning experience of the stuff that you do that look good and it's working and other stuff. After a while, well, I thought that was good, but it's not, It's just funny.
If there's one thing that you will never stop doing, no matter how old you get or how long you've been doing something, you will always be learning. That's one thing that will always happen in life.
Exactly.
Yep. And I have two more questions for you. You ready for the most difficult question of the whole interview?
Oh boy. I'm always ready.
All right.
Fire.
Going back to songwriting now. How do you know when a song is done?
You never really know that. You just at some point you got to say this is where we stand and this is where it's good. I mean, it's experience brings that after making albums because you have to realize you can drive yourself mad trying to get better and more perfect. But it's like what I said earlier. It's not about that. It's really delivering emotions, and perfection isn't emotional a lot of times, especially nowadays with Pro Tools. You can drive yourself crazy and record and do a snippet here and a little wave length there and stuff that nobody hears, but you think it's going to make the song better, but it really doesn't. Yeah. So I don't know if that was a good answer or not, but I think with time you sort of learn to let good enough alone, and certainly having a good producer by your side helps with that respect.
Absolutely. I've always said that a producer is the fifth Beatle, the sixth Beatle. If you're in Slipknot, the 11th Beatle.
In our case, Andy Sneap is certainly that man. And I think we all have it. Here's the thing. When I work alone sometimes and I record guitar parts alone, I can drive myself into oblivion because I get so obsessed with certain nuances that later on nobody will hear. But as far as songwriting is concerned, you got to be careful not to overdo it, and at some point, good enough it's good.
Yeah, you don't want to overcook a steak, so don't overcook a song either.
There you go.
Yeah, I've always said that the best thing to compare music to is steak. I don't know why.
I always said because fans always ask like, how did you record this? Who played this? Who played that lick? And I say, well, it's like making sausage. You don't really ever need to know what goes into it as long as the outcome is good. Enjoy it for what it is and take it, but don't question everything that goes into it so much. You know what I mean?
Spoken like a true German. As a Bavarian, that was one of the best that was one of the best analogies I've ever heard. Excellent work. That was great. That was
like making sausage. You don't want to know what's in that sausage. Just eat it and be happy. And Germans know a lot about sausage. There you go.
And I've been to Bavaria numerous times. I could attest to that.
Exactly.
And
they do have good sausage, don't they?
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, I just think the food there in general is amazing.
Schweinsachse.
Yep.
Schweinsbrat.
Wiener Schnitzel. Wiener Schnitzel.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong. And since the last time I visited Germany, I cannot drink American beer anymore. I'm insulted by that.
Yeah, well, as you should be, because that stuff's not for human consumption.
Exactly. It's beer-flavored water, right?
Pretty much. I agree. But, you got to do with what you have at your disposal, or you buy import or something.
Exactly. And the final question I wanted to ask you is when people have been following you guys forever, and when you look at the debut 1979 album to I'm a Rebel to even people still following you now to The Rise of Chaos and To Mean to Die now, a lot of people have connected with you, and a lot of bands have claimed to have taken inspiration from you. I know many guitar players where they said that they wanted to play the V model because of your guitar playing. So when you hear on how other bands have taken inspiration from you in the thrash metal movement and in the hardcore movement and so much, and see how people are inspired by your guitar playing, does that at all influence Accept, or maybe make you look at yourself differently as an artist as well?
Well, it makes me proud and happy. It doesn't necessarily change anything I do or would do, because that's kind of a death sentence. As soon as you think of yourself as hot shit, or as soon as you think, well, the world is watching, I better do what they think. I don't know. That never enters my mind. I kind of do what I want to do, what I think is good. But at the same time, I'm super happy if people outside take notice, and especially when I hear that people say they used Accept as an influence or inspiration early on when we made songs like Fast as a Shark or whatever, then yeah, man, it's amazing. Of course. What do you think? It's killer. It's the best. To me, that almost means more than having maybe had a super successful album in the charts and whatever, which is nice. Of course, I wouldn't mind that, and wouldn't mind selling millions and millions of albums. But the praise from your peers is also, I mean, that's almost better to me. It means a lot, anyhow.
Yeah, definitely. People connect with your work, and people connect with and what's funny is that when I went to the Accept show at Irving Plaza, I saw many different age range of fans too. I saw a lot of people wearing the merch from the Rise of Chaos album, but then I saw people wearing I'm a Rebel shirts and Breaker shirts and Balls to the Wall and Metal Heart and all that. So it just seems
if they're still fitted with those shirts.
I know.
That's it.
I was at that show and people asked how old I am, and they said, "This shirt is older than you." I'm I'm aware of that. But so it's cool. It's cool how you always cultivate new fan bases as well.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, that keeps the ball rolling, and it's great to see a younger generation joining the crowd from back then. I mean, we have an age range of, I don't know, 16 to 60 or 65. I don't know, but it's the full spectrum by now, because new fans discover the old stuff and where it all came from, and that's great.
Yep,
love it.
Definitely. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed discussing with you and getting an insight on To Mean to Die. Is there just anything with Accept that you would like to plug or promote for the time being? No, I mean, until we see each other again on tour at a live show, please, everybody, enjoy the new album, To Mean to Die, and hopefully, everybody stay safe, and we'll see you out there soon. Yeah, we look forward to when we could reunite. But thank you so much, Wolf. Everybody, Wolf Hoffmann of Accept, To Mean to Die, coming out 2021 via Nuclear Blast. Be sure to pick it up then. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.